Hi everyone. Just give it another minute just while people join. The audio and camera is off, but I can see quite a few people are still connecting. I'm encouraged to see so many people from the previous sessions today and yesterday, so we're obviously doing something right. It's lovely to see people coming back. We've got a nice full session again, which is great. So we'll get started. I'm sure people will kind of be joining as we go, but in the interest of time, we'll kick off. And then we are going to have a full session today. So today we're looking at children's images and the kind of the impact that this has on children's rights and well-being, and thinking about how as a sector we can tell children's stories respectfully while successfully communicating the work that we're doing. So I'm really happy that we've got Vicky Ferguson with us today, as well as Boki Achola, Vicky from Chance for Childhood and Boki from Glad's House, Kenya, who are going to be going through the work that they've been doing, thinking about use of children's images and kind of reframing how they use them and removing them in some cases from all of their communications. So it's something that I think as a sector is really important for us to think about. Just a couple of housekeeping points before I hand over. So we're going to have a couple of breakout sessions at the end of the presentation. So we'll have presentations and then we'll go out into some group work. We'll come back and have another presentation and then go into a second group. So there'll be lots of opportunity to discuss with each other some of the challenges and solutions that we have come across. Please feel free to use the chat box to introduce yourself to other participants. You can ask any technical questions. If you're having any issues, we'll try and help you resolve those. And you can also share any useful links or resources in there, and as well as, you know, anything that you think would be of use or that you want to share with the rest of the group. You can tag us in social media posts using the hashtag CSE Network Forum 2022. And just lastly, it should have come up with a message when you joined saying that the session's being recorded. If you're not comfortable with that, please feel free to leave and we'll send out a recording of the session after it's finished. With the caveat that that won't include the breakout sessions, so it'll just be the main presentations that we'll send out to everybody afterwards. So I won't take up any more time and I'll hand over to Vicky, who's going to go through the work that they've been doing with the OverExposed campaign, and also from Boki thinking about Glad's House Kenya and the use of images. So I'll hand over to you, Vicky.
Thanks so much. Hi everyone, thanks Jess. It's great to be here, great to be back with all my street connected children friends, and to talk about something that I'm both Boki and I, not speaking for you Boki, are hugely passionate about, which is more ethical storytelling and use of images when it comes to street children. Boki, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you, Vicky. My name is Fred Boki Achola and I work with Glad's House Kenya in Mombasa. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. And I'm Vicky Ferguson. I'm head of safeguarding. I'm so sorry
about that, everyone.
Our internet went down in the office. So where were we? Next slide, please, Ellie. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the OverExposed campaign, which is a campaign Chance for Childhood launched in September. It is, we're looking at how we as organisations and individuals reframe our thinking on how we tell children's stories and use their photos. So what we asked organisations to do is to make these 5 pledges, one which is about children's rights. Now, the consortium is so strong on rights, like everyone here will hopefully is as passionate as we are about children's rights, about the UNCRC and upholding those rights of children. And whilst we often talk about those in the context of the work we do, it's really important in the way that we tell their stories too, in terms of their right to participate in how we tell their story, the right to protection. I'm going to put in the chat shortly an amazing blog that our very own Sian Wynn wrote about children's rights and the OverExposed campaign. So I really encourage you all to go and read that. The next one is informed consent, which we are going to look at in more detail later on in the session. So I will leave that just with saying informed consent. The next one is about positive stories. How do we use strength-based language? And I think this one's so critical when we talk about street-connected children, because often we talk about them with a deficit-based approach. They're poor, they're lonely, they're drug addicts, they're helpless. And I, along with Bookie, have had the privilege of working with street children for almost 17 years now. And when I think about street-connected children, I don't think about the deficits they have. I think about how courageous they are, how funny they are, how smart they are, all those incredible skills that they have to find on the street. And how do we talk about them? Acknowledging their really difficult situation, but also acknowledging their incredible resilience and skills and just being brilliant young people. The next one is about how we tell stories and the risks that we can put children at when we tell their stories. You know, particularly I think with children with street situations, often we're identifying them, we're showing you where they are, we're showing you where they live in a city. But what if police are doing roundups and use that information to identify a pocket of street children? What if they don't want to be identified as a street child anymore because they go back to school? So those really complex issues of risk are really important when we look at street connectedness. And then the last one, something I'm absolutely fanatical about, is the power that we as adults hold when we're telling children and young people's stories. Do they feel comfortable to say no to us? Because often we're their only safe adults, we're the only space they have to come and talk to us. And actually, can they say no to us if we're holding their future in our hands, as uncomfortable as that is? So these are the pledges we're asking organisations to take. Ellie, can I have the next slide, please? And I just wanted to show you some of the organisations that have already pledged those 5 things. One is the consortium. We're absolutely delighted that the consortium were one of our founding pledges, and we're working closely together to disseminate this information further. Well, I'll put a link in the chat to our website so you can look a bit more, and we hope that some of the members will pledge to join us. What's really important about OverExposed is that it is the start of a conversation. I don't have all the answers. No one has all the answers, but what we can do, and what this session is going to hopefully do, is bring us all together to find the solutions together about how we better tell stories, how we better take photos, and how we center children's well-being in that. So a little bit more about OverExposed is that it came from Glad's House. It came from our own work in anti-racism and listening to our partners. So Bookie, I'd love to bring you in now. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Great. Ellie, can we have the next slide, please? And I'm just going to ask Bookie to talk a little bit around the motivation at Glad's House. You made this change in 2017, and why you made this change, and just a little bit around the experience.
Thank you, Vicky. We made this change, and 2 things stand out strongly on why we made this change. One, there was an incident that happened in the street of Mombasa with a young man. He was involved in some activities that take place in the street every day. Him and his colleagues snatched a mobile phone from somebody. So they were chased, and he was seriously beaten by a mob. We call it mob justice, to the extent that they chopped out 2 of his fingers, and he bled so much. So he ran for me for help. He came to the center and he found me, and he was bleeding, and no hospital could take him at that time. So we administered first aid to him and took him in to recover. But when I was doing that, I wanted to take photographs so that I could tell the world what happens to children on the street. So my intention was clear, to try and fight, challenge mob justice, because children on the street have different activities, and at some time they end up on the wrong side of the law. So I wanted to show that mob justice is not a solution. We should find for better solutions. And I took his consent when taking the photos. He was so much in agreement. He was treated, and he went back to street, and he went back to his daily life. He was a car wash in town. So after some time, another boy came to my office, and I requested him to help me clean my office. So he found the photo in the dustbin and took the photo with him, put it in his pocket, and went to town. And when he went to town, he showed the boy the photo, and the boy was so mad. He was mad that his photo was going around. His photos without fingers, without teeth, was going around. And he remembered that I had taken the photo. So when our street workers and social workers went to town that day, they really got it mad. He had mobilized some of his friends, and they had created a story that we are taking their photos and benefiting from them, reaping from their photos. And it became so bad that I had to go to town to talk to him and rectify the situation, and told him how the photo by bad chance ended up with him again on the street. Although I apologized, the impact was so great, the damage had been done, and it opened my eyes. The other photo was taken by a volunteer. He came, a volunteer from UK. He came, we went to the streets, and he felt so sorry for a certain old lady who had a son begging on the street. So he requested if he could buy iron sheets and make the woman a house, which we did. But when we were constructing the little house, we were taking photographs, and the boy appeared in the photo. He was so malnourished, so tiny and hungry. So after some time, he got a well-wisher and went to study Bible. He went to Bible school and studied the Bible and became a prominent person in town. Later on, he encountered the photo, and I was with the photo. He came to my office and he saw the photo on a desktop. And he looked at the photo and he told me, these are some of the things, these are some parts of my life that I wouldn't want to remember. So at that time, it was okay. But after life has changed, he has moved on. He wouldn't want to associate with those photos. So it came to light to me that priorities do change. A boy or a child might be in a certain situation at that time, and even he or she might give you consent to take the photo. But after some time, priorities change, and they don't want to encounter with such memories again. It really pushes them back and draws them completely off the line. So at that time, it became clear to me that taking photos of children when they were in vulnerable state only adds to more trauma, in addition to the trauma that those children already have. So from that, we took it upon ourselves not to take photos of children in their worst situation, in traumatic situation. The capital thing is that situations do change. And when they change, at times they don't want those memories. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Vicky. And I think that for us, particularly all of us working with street connected children, is such an important point about we ask children to capture their worst moments of their lives, their most traumatic moments, and we use them as case studies. And actually, I know if I think about the worst moments in my life, I wouldn't want them a picture taken of them, and I wouldn't want to be defined by that moment or reminded of that moment. And because a social media post lasts forever, and we'll come to that a bit more, it's not just a snapshot in a file, it's often for hundreds, if not thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people to see. And we have to really bear that in mind. Buki, I'd love you to just talk a little bit around how you feel your relationship with children and young people has changed since you've taken this element of extracting their pictures out of your relationships with them.
Thank you. Our relationship with children have so much improved. I think we are the only organization in Mombasa who stopped taking children photos. And apart from taking children's photo, we are the first organization to sensitize them on how to protect their image, especially when they are very low or in their worst moments. And that has gone down well with children. We've seen them stop people taking their photos. The information has gone through, and it has improved our relationship with children. They know that we don't take photos, and if we have to take photos, then those photos are depicting their best moments and with their consent. Thank you.
Thanks, Bookie. And I think it's great. I love this photo that we're sharing at the moment. I actually took this in Mombasa, and I think it really is a powerful image of a safe adult with two young people that he's talking to. And I think you can really demonstrate the work you do without showing a child's face. You can see that that's a really important conversation between children and safe, or young people and safe adults being captured there. So we just wanted to give you an example of what we did at Glad's House. We're going to move on, because actually we really believe that talking to one another is the solution, will enable us to find individual solutions to this. So Ellie, can we have the next slide, please? We are going to break out into groups now. We're going to have 3 groups, and we're just going to ask you all to think about some of the challenges that you face at your organizations in storytelling. And then what we'd really like you to do is to collectively discuss solutions to those challenges. So it's not about the problem, it's about the solution. So as Bookie will always say to young people and to staff, and he taught me that. So let's be solution focused in this. So in your groups, really think about this. And when we talk about storytelling, I'm talking about case studies, quotes, photos, anything that comes in telling those stories. So we're going to break out into 3 groups, and we'll have about 15 minutes to chat about this, and then we'll come back together. Well, I don't know about anyone else, but we didn't even get to one solution.
Wow.
We
transported us like that.
We talked a lot about challenges, but no solution, which I think says a lot about the current issue that we all have. And I think, you know what, I will put some links in the chat, but at Chance for Childhood, just a little plug is that we have created a resource hub for the 5 different pledges that will have, there's like a 5-minute talking point video, there's session plans for your team and also with young people, and then links to loads of other resources. So hopefully that would help you in your in this journey to really thinking about this stuff, because we need days, not an hour and a half. So Ellie, can we move the slide, please? Sorry. Okay, so informed consent. This came up a lot in our group. Does anyone want to feedback about any key challenges that they had before we move on, actually? Maybe we'll just stop the slides for a second, actually, Ellie, sorry to be a pain, so we can all see each other. Can we just stop sharing the screen? No, okay. Does anyone want to share? There you all are. That's much nicer, isn't it? Does anyone want to share any of the challenges that they spoke about in your groups? Or any great solutions? Maybe we should be solution focused. Any great solutions? Does anyone want
I believe that we should give trainings to the stakeholders, like the media reporters as well, because the media reporters, electronic media, when I talk about media, we have 2 sort of medias in Pakistan, electronic media and the print media.
Yeah.
So there are no written regulation for the print media. I talk about the newspapers, but there are regulations for the electronic media.
Yeah.
There is an act that regulates the electronic media.
Yeah.
So I believe that trainings to the stakeholders, particularly the media, because they quite often publish or print the stories with the real names, with the photos. I'm not talking about Europe. They have a very high awareness over there,
well,
but in the subcontinent.
but I think that's a really important point. So I think, yeah, training, and I think that's not just in terms of media, but also in our own teams to really understand, you know, at Chance for Childhood, we do a quarterly refresh on informed consent because it's so critical that we understand it. So I think that's a really good point, Samad, about training. So thank you. Were there any other solutions any groups found? Ours didn't have any. We were just chatting about problems. So any other good solutions?
I mean, I've started taking off all the information from all the photos, so no one can see where any of the kids are.
Yeah.
So no dates, no areas, no times or anything. And although we try and take some of our pictures from the back, obviously when you're trying to show like them learning a skill, that's really hard.
Yeah.
We do try and do side on, so they're not necessarily, you know, directly focused in the camera.
Yeah.
But apart from that, we haven't really found like another alternative of a way that we can show what we're doing.
Yeah, we have a dance program, and we've had the same, like we've had to really shift the way we tell the story. So it's I feel your pain, Jenny. Sian, you've got your hand up.
Hello, yeah, I just wanted to share something that we had in our conversation, which was around how we something really powerful that Boki said actually, which was, if we see as an example, if we see the food that a street connected child is eating as being leftovers or old food because they've been handed them from a restaurant at the end of the day, if we talk about them as being leftovers, we're not seeing it from the perspective of the child, for whom it's just their food. It's their food, and we shouldn't bring our own negative perceptions to the way that we tell their stories. And a solution to that really was about always going in with a positive view and an attitude and a solution-focused approach. And if you focus on the solutions, that you'll always create a positive story.
Yeah, I love that. Bucky Chola being as wise as ever. Jess, you've got your hand up.
We did have a couple of solutions actually in our group, but we did also talk a lot about the challenges, and one of the big ones that came up was this kind of tension between the stories that we want to tell compared to the ones that children want to tell, and how to kind of navigate that. And Abby from Toy Box gave a really nice example of a story and a case study about education in a school setting, and actually one of the children, the thing that they wanted to speak about was the fact that the color of the door was blue and that was their favorite color, and how that's just so different to the things that we want to tell, and actually speaking to them and trying to find a way of including, you know, obviously we might not be able to just share that information, it needs to be rounded out, but to share just get the feedback from the children and ask them to actually share things, so it's not just the negative stuff, and it is the positive things as well.
And we did a huge piece of work on this, like with developing the resource hub for Overexposed. So every pledge has these session plans you can do with children and young people. How do you want us to talk about you? Look at our current stuff. What do you think about it? Do you like it? Do you not like it? How do you want us to tell your lives? How do you want, and you know, do you understand your rights in a digital world? Because I think often as organizations, we don't ensure that children know their rights enough around saying no and things. So I think that's a really critical point, Jess. Thank you. And I think we really have to listen to children and young people in this. So thank you. Kelvin, you've got your hand up. I'm sorry you got caught up in our group. But do you want to share something now? Okay, I think maybe we've lost Calvin. Okay, oh yes, there's one more hand up. Mind it.
Hi, thanks, Vicky. So one of the things I struggle with, and I think that's probably true for several of us, so I've seen examples of presentations where people have been exceptionally careful not to portray children in images, not to have them recognizable, etc. And just one example of that, with all respect, probably was the opening session that Pia gave at the start of this network forum, where I recognized that was intentional, and obviously there is a lot of good things to say for it. The one thing that I really struggle with, though, is I loved it how you shared, Vicky, that When you think about street children, you see joyful, beautiful young people with tremendous resilience, with personality, with character, and all that. And that's how we, in our messaging as Amani, try to portray those children as much as possible. Now, when I look at the presentation or whatever media outreach, where all of it is sort of anonymized, children do not have a face, children are not shown like children, it gives me the impression that it's almost stigmatizing them. It's almost sort of portraying them as a group instead of, hey, these are kids like any other child. They are like your children who can have joy, who have character, who you can see the character in their faces. At some point in Amani, one of our people who is probably on the call thought, okay, let's put like black marks over their eyes.
Yeah.
It's a sensitive story, and then suddenly they're seen like criminals, at least in the West. So my challenge with this is, if we don't portray all that joy, all that strength, all that positivity, then we're treating them as a group, not as individuals. Then we're portraying them as sad victims and not as children with agency. It all becomes very, very gloomy to me. Which is definitely not going to help our advocacy or our fundraising. So I am in general I'm in general not a proponent of one extreme over the other. So I think we need to find sort of the in-between solution to all this.
I think that's what OverExposed is about. And I think, firstly, I would challenge you to go and have a look at Chance for Childhood's website, because we have some of the most beautiful, joyful photos you've ever seen, and there are no faces in them of children. And they are deeply moving, deeply beautiful. They are actually my favourite set of images we've ever had at Chance for Childhood. They're stunning. And it took a lot of time to get that right. But no one wants to silence children. No one wants to make children invisible. But I have to say, at the end of the day, can I look a child in the eye and say I've kept them as safe as possible, realise their rights as much as I possibly can, empowered them to tell their story in a way that is safe and ethical. And right now, we don't have all the answers. And so we don't have identifiable images whilst we work out the solutions. I'm not saying we'll never put children's faces in. I'm saying we are not strong enough or robust enough right now to keep them safe from harm, from damage, from trauma in the way we tell their stories. And I think probably most organisations, I don't know any organisation that can right now say, hand on heart, we have true, authentic consent, informed consent. We have true, we've thought about every single risk that we put at them. We've asked every single child how they want to be talked about. So let's think about how we do that meaningfully. And that's why it's so important to come together and have discussions, because everyone's having these internal dialogues in organizations or as practitioners. You know, Bucky and I had so many soul-searching discussions around this. And no one's trying to make them invisible, but I also think you can't say you can't see a child's joy if you can't see their face, because I would 1000% disagree with that, because also words are so powerful, and how if we can work with children and young people about how they want us to tell their stories, and that's the answer, isn't it, about how they tell the stories. I'm so aware of time, and we do need to move on, and we'll come to a discussion later, but I don't want to miss out the informed consent bit, which is obviously a really clear worry for a lot of people. So we will have more time for chat. Ellie, can we have the slides back, please? Oh, that's my face. No one needs that, do they? Okay, next slide, please. So we're going to look at informed consent. Sorry, Ellie, next slide again, please. Does everyone know what informed consent is? The informed bit is the critical bit in this. Okay, so informed consent is someone giving consent to use their image with all of the information possible in terms of how, so what is the risk of their image? So Ellie, sorry, next slide again, please. But I really, before we go to what consent is, I really want us to think about the specific challenges that we face with street connected children and informed consent. So I've put these 3 as really clear consent. So if they're still on the street under the influence, consent when that, and we talked about this in our breakout group, consent without parent or guardian present, and the power dynamic that we have within that relationship. Can anyone talk about any other specific challenges they face in consent when it comes to street connected children? Do you think those are sort of the 3 real specifics to street connected children?
There is also control.
Here we go. Here's a chola.
Like you talk to a child and it gives you consent of using the photograph. But after you have taken that photograph, you don't have control over it. Once it hits the media, then it's gone, and you'll never know where it's up.
Yeah, I think this is a critical point, Bucky. And I've had conversations with local NGOs around this point, and how people have downloaded the images of children they used and misused them and told different stories. And those children, those street connected children, have lost the relationship with their safe adults. Okay, I've got loads of hands. I'm going to go to Rose first. Rose.
Thank you. So I think just to add into the power dynamic challenge, it's not only to children, but also even the parents or the caregivers.
Absolutely.
I think because we work with them, we support them. So sometimes they might be feeling obliged to consent just because of the services we provide.
Yeah.
Without understanding what are they consenting to.
Yeah, thank you, Rose. I think that's really, power doesn't just sit with the children, but also with the family and caregivers. And power is a really uncomfortable conversation to acknowledge, but it's so critical when we think about these things. Sian, you've got your hand up.
I have just a very quick, very specific and almost practical thing around consent when it comes to taking images of street connected children, which is the challenge of the fact that the street connected children are street connected children by virtue of the environment that they exist and survive within, and therefore the pictures that we take of them we can often feel a pressure to make sure that they're pictured within that environment in a way that positions them in it, and a child may not want to give consent for their photograph to be taken in that environment and would prefer for it to be taken elsewhere. And how do we manage that?
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Sian. Calvin, you've got your hand up. Is that a historical hand or? Yeah, okay, I'll take that as a historical sound. And I think the challenges of taking images and gaining consent with street connected children, I think some of the most complex globally in terms of how we do that and what we can put in place. So I've kind of put some top tips together for informed consent that I think people really need to think about in these contexts. So, sorry, Ellie, can I have another slide, please? So in terms of the way we ask, and I think this is particularly critical with children and young people who maybe have had periods away from education, often consent is this really complex form. And now, obviously, under 18s is even more complex. In the UK, children over the age of 13 can consent for themselves if they uphold the Gillick competencies or the Fraser guidelines, but that is a whole nother case. So, but I think, when you're asking people, often it's this really like text heavy form, and we talk them through it, and it's very complicated. So actually, is there a better way of telling people what's going to happen? So like one thing we're looking at trialing at Chance for Childhood is we're going to do videos. So we're going to record one of our field staff in local language doing the consent form, and then we're going to play that recording to someone. And what does that do? It means that there's less chance of it being mistranslated, misconstrued, misrepresented. There's more, I hate the word control because consent isn't about control, but it's very confusing going, oh yeah, your photo might be on social media, or it might be on our website, and all of these things. So how can you make that accessible and palatable for people when we're telling them about it? Some had no age of consent and age of criminal liability are different. They're two very different things. One sits in a health setting, one sits in a law setting. So this is something that I think we're really bad at as a sector, not just street connected children, but as international development. Do we explain where these photos are being used? So having your image on a social media post where it could go viral, millions of people could see it, it will also be there forever. It will be on your feed. That's what you call it, isn't it? A feed, forever. Is very different to having it in like maybe a newsletter that 1,000 people get, that probably, let's be honest, 90% of people will delete it. It won't sit in inboxes. It will have a very different impact on life. And so when we think about consent, it's very easy. Can we have consent to use your photo? But actually, going back to Bookie's point, which I think is critical about, they don't want to be defined as that thing forever. The longevity of a social media post versus perhaps a website page versus a newsletter is very different things. So, or a pop-up banner, for example. And actually, so are we really explaining how that photo is going to be used? Because though I wouldn't want to be on a social media post, but I might be okay with being on a newsletter kind of vibe, you know? And I think really, and often we take a photo and it's very vague anyway, and we don't know where it's going to be used. So we have to really make sure that that sort of is really clear to people, like how we're going to use, not just can we use your picture, but how we're going to use your picture. Ellie, next slide, please. So yeah, so including a child, and I think, you know, what's wonderful about the consortium is that we are very, as organisations, we talk a lot about being child-centred, we talk a lot about children's rights, and actually even if it's parents giving consent or an adult giving consent, and I think in our group we talked about like social services or the children's department giving consent for children. And, you know, but are those children's voices included in that consent process? So legally, that adult, and actually, I don't think that maybe, you know, I could have again another 3-hour workshop on that whole situation. But are you actually talking, even if an adult is consenting for a child, that child should be at the center of the conversation. They should be included in that conversation, because an adult might say it's okay for their photo to be taken, but what if the child doesn't want it taken? Who's asking them? And often when we talk about adult like consent, we're not actually asking the child, we're saying to the grown-ups, do you mind us doing this thing to your child? Do you mind us extracting this thing from your child? So actually ask the child as well. I think, you know, that's really, really critical. And we often hear that children, oh, I wasn't asked, it was just my parent, my mum and dad said yes, or my carer said yes, my foster carer, or the government said yes. I mean, that's, you know, it's really tricky, but I think and this is Bookie made this point about losing control. Once an image is out there, you have no control over it. People can download it, people can use it in any way they want. And do we really adequately explain that to children and their adults, or, you know, young people? Do we really say, actually, we have no control over this image once it's online? We don't own it. It's the World Wide Web owns it, and we really need to think that we make that clear enough to people when it goes online. Next slide, please. So removing consent, we often say you can withdraw consent at any time, but can they really? Because for example, who do they talk to? Like, it's really easy to say, oh, we'll take it offline, but do they know who to talk to? And I think particularly this is more prevalent for an INGO. You know, I know a lot of people here will have very direct, close relationships with the children and young people and their carers and their, but actually, do we know how to take how to take an image? How, you know, at Chance for Childhood, could they really contact me? Hello, Vicky, strange white woman in London. I'd like my photo taken down. You know, that's a really complex, actually quite a big thing that we don't think about when we're getting consent. And the last one, you know, we've talked about it so much. So many of you acknowledge this in our group and also in this centre. Can people really say no? If you have the future of someone in your hands, if a parent is reliant on you to take their child to school, are they really going to say no to you? And how do you create that? How do you make that work for them? And it's a really, really challenging one. So those are my things that I always work with my team to really think about when we are gaining consent. And it's not easy. And I think particularly given, you know, substance misuse, which is so, mental health issues, which is so prevalent with, you know, in street communities, with lack of parental consent, and these things are even more challenging. So what we're going to do is break back into groups and really start to unpick some of the solutions that we can find around consent. So we're going to go, I don't know if we're going back into the same groups or different groups, but we are going to, Jess has nodded at me, but I don't know what she nodded at me at for, but one of those is happening.
Same groups.
Same groups. So we're going to really look at those consent solutions, and if anyone has found some good things, that there are workarounds that they found have been really positive in their setting, because this is all about learning from each other. So Ellie, over to you in the breakout groups, please. Welcome back, everyone. How was that? How were the conversations? Oh, Ellie, we can stop sharing the slides now, thanks. Anyone want to share any reflections around your conversations, around some solutions around informed consent? Did anyone have any, or does everyone go, oh, it's a real headache? It is a real headache. I know that, lads, don't worry. TJ.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I've been reflecting on the last point that was made in our group. I think Smita, right? Yeah, because I've been feeling like when the way we talked about consent, and it's mostly about what we want to do with the pictures, and it's not about what the children are looking for. So if in the area of sharing the stories of children, if it could happen like we asking the children or informing the children that we want to share your story to the world through this media, how do you see as what's the best way do you want us to share? Do you think we should add your pictures? Do you think videos will do? Are you confident on that one? I think it's going to be a bit more moving away from like we are demanding from them, and then they are pressured by maybe the relationship we have, the way they see us, and because we shouldn't run away from the fact that when we're working with them, there's that kind of power relationship, even though we try as much as possible to bring them up together, but definitely inwardly, they will see us as powerful and looking up to something for us. And so refusing to give consents basically inwardly might be difficult for them depending on where they're coming from. So if this worked around the other way about telling them we want to share the story because of the work that we do, what do you think? And then if you think pictures are required, and then if they accept them, we tell them the implication of us using their pictures, how far the pictures will go and what it means. And if they are okay, then we're good to go. Yeah, thanks, Tej. I love that. And I think for me, we at our OverExposed online launch, we had a young woman with lived experience. She was a mental health lived experience ambassador and was a refugee, had many years as a Rwandan refugee. And I said to her, Grace, how do we make sure we include young people in the way we tell our stories? She went, hang on a minute, Vicky. Our stories are ours, and we are
it is a privilege for you to have our story. We are doing you a favor sharing our story. And I was like, yeah, that's it, isn't it? We've got this totally wrong. Like, and it was such a confronting, challenging moment for me as someone that has spent 3 years only thinking about this stuff. And it was like, yeah, it is, they are doing us a favor and we need to listen to them about how we do this better. So thank you for that, Tej. And Smita made a really important point about even within your organization. Smita, do you want to share that actually with the group about what you were saying?
So I was sharing about my own experience in India in a child sponsorship program, and I realized that, you know, who is collecting those images and how. Part of it is very, very important. Are we really collecting it in a manner where the power relationship can be balanced out? And then am I explaining, as Tajini was saying, that why and how the image is going to be used? And second point which I wanted to share in our group, and because of lack of time I wasn't able to do, is this whole question of if we restrict the images of such children, then what would happen? Will we be able to promote the agency of street children out there? Because anyways the countries have made enough of effort to invisibilize them, so we would again be reiterating that in some way. So that's a fundamental thing which the group needs to address before we kind of finally take a call on no images of children. It's an easy way out of the whole debate. So how far the protection element needs to go is something. And then I guess, in my experience, I realized children do want to have a face. Some of them are even comfortable taking their own names, and they get very surprised when we show them or read out or show them the video where their names are changed. They don't like it. I would not like if somebody changes my name and shows a video out there. So that's also an element of thing which we need to be considerate about. So these are a couple of more points to debate. I really don't have a solution to this.
No, but I think that last point is so critical, isn't it? And that's why robust, true, informed consent is critical. So children can make an informed decision about the impact of that. And do we do that can we really do that right now? I think, having really been obsessed with informed consent for many years, I think it's very, very hard to gain true informed consent from a particular child or young person. That's not to say it isn't possible, but a huge amount of work has to go into it for us to get to that point. And I think it's an acknowledgement of all of us who are responsible for all these incredible young people's well-being, that we have to play that part in making that easier for everyone. And that's a lot of work. And again, that's why we created the Resource Hub, was to try and reduce some of the work for other people. There's some great comments in the chat. Does anyone want to speak to these in the wider space? Sean, you were saying, this is when I wish I had my glasses on. How we hold each other to account. And I think that's really critical and really challenging to do. I know in Chance for Childhood, we have had some very difficult conversations, even since OverExposed launch, when I've gone, I'm not happy with this. I don't think this meets the ethics. And that can be really difficult. And you have to have a really safe space with one another and a really trusting relationship with each other to do that. But I think it's really, and this is why I'm so delighted that there's almost 50, well, there was at one point 40 of you on the call. That shows the commitment to this. This shows that this is something really important to us all. And I hope this is the first conversation of many that we have collectively, because, like Grace said to me, it's a privilege that we hold these stories, and we have to hold them in the right way. So, and how do we help each other hold those? And how do we challenge each other safely as we hold those? Because it's a huge responsibility we all have with that, I think. And I think sometimes we underestimate how big a responsibility that is as we try and keep street children on the agenda. That's a big responsibility that we have, and let's not think about that too much, looking at Pia and the CSCD. About organizational storage of images, really important. Jess, there's loads, just in terms of the technical stuff, there's loads of stuff. It has to be in a secure either folder online that's password protected, or in a lockable storage cabinet that only certain people have access to. You should only keep them for a maximum of 5 years. I'm actually pushing for 3, but my fundraising team are just absolutely not entertaining it. And again, it comes back to Bookie's really important point about life's change, and they don't want to be identified as that anymore. So, and also when that time runs out, you have to go back and delete it from everything that it's been on as well when that time runs out. I'm talking too much. Does anyone else want to say anything? So I'm just reading out the chat, but I also don't want to give, if anyone wants to share anything. Yeah, Sean saying about, oh, Pia, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say there've been a few comments where people have said that the OverExposed campaign is suggesting never using children's images. And I don't think that's what I've understood from what we're doing, Vicky. So I just wanted to clarify that. I think my understanding has always been it's about being much more careful, mindful, thinking about where you use it in context.
Thank you, Pia.
So I just thought it was worth putting that out.
No, sorry, and I'm sorry if I haven't been we decided at Chance for Childhood to take all identifiable images of children out, because we felt that although we do have really robust processes, they weren't strong and robust enough. And until they're there, we didn't want to put any children at risk. So we might bring them back in, but also we're not asking any other organisation to do that. What we're asking organisations to do is to join us on a journey to tell more ethical stories and use more ethical images where we centre children, where we think about children's rights, where we think about informed consent, all those things. So thank you for that clarification, Pia. That's very helpful. You'd think the amount of times I've talked about this in the last 2 months, I'd have nailed it, but anyone else before we finish? You might get 5 minutes back of your day.
There's a couple of things in the chat, a couple more points, one from Sylvester and one from Smita that might be worth.
Oh, sorry, thank you, Sean. At Future Focus, we have the consent policy for image. Yes, hello. You come off mute. Yes, do, you've got your hand up. Is it Sylvester?
He was having connection problems before.
But he's saying that we believe that most consents are manipulated, and I think that, you know, is
hello.
Oh, here he is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I was also struggling to get on. Yes. My opinion, my experience about in our storytelling, especially with children, is being overexploited. In our communities in Sierra Leone, you find out that people will go, they will take photos of children for their own personal purpose, but it will appear that it is for their own benefit, and that benefit does not come back to them. So when Chance for Childhood launched the overexposure, and I saw it that it is very prudent, we decided to join them in the campaign, because we have seen a lot of these things happening in our communities. You will see people like when the the COVID breakout, we have persons living with disability, they sit by the bank to, you know, ask, they are like beggars to ask for their livelihood. We saw people taking their photos, they will write good stories that these are the people who want to support and that kind of thing. And that thing does not come back. So we think that this is the time for us to see how we can really regulate the use of imagery, especially with children whose consents are sometimes, you know, being undermined. So that is why I actually posted that small statement, and to say that, yes, for us, we think we have to look at it critically. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sylvester. And you were the first consortium member to pledge, so we were delighted to have you. It has been noted that Bucky Achola has not pledged to the Overexposed campaign. I'm going to publicly shame him.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Even though he inspired it. Anyway, Bucky, have you got any closing points before we finish?
Thank you, Vicky. My closing points, as Pia said, it is not to completely take out photos of children, but anytime we take photos of children, they should show the strength, the happiness, and the will to prosper, and not depicting them in miserable situations. And again, the power dynamics. I think organizations and social workers should be held accountable to any photo that originates from the organization that depicts children in a very bad way. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Vicky. Wise words as always. Let's leave it there because he's the oracle. Thanks so much, everyone. Please do reach out if you want to have further chats.
I just wanted to say before we leave as well, just popped up the slide. So really linked to this conversation we've been having today around kind of respecting the views of children and listening to them and letting them kind of dictate the stories they want to share. We've got another session tomorrow morning looking at civil rights and freedoms for student-connected children. So please join us. It's been really nice to see so many people joining, lots of multiple sessions. So hopefully that will continue. And we're finishing on time, which is amazing. Thank you, Vicky, for being tighter on timekeeping than I am.
It's a pleasure.
And this, yeah, just a couple of other sessions that we're running that might be of interest to people that have come today. Thursday, enabling access to education. And then on Friday, a more practical session looking at writing a winning fundraising application. So another big thing that organisations, I'm sure, will be grappling with. So hopefully we'll see you all there. And thank you so much, Vicky and Boki. It's been really great.
Thanks so much, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye. See you tomorrow.